Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. As we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel, throughout the region, with keen focus, of course, on the implications of the U.S. election on the Middle East, on the latest decision by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to replace the longtime Defense Minister Yoav Gallant with the Foreign Minister of Israel, namely Israel Katz, as well as the different fronts, with chief focus also on Lebanon, which has launched dozens of rockets just in the last several hours towards Israel, both northern Israel and central Israel. It's important for us to remember how the war began. 397 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200, mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping approximately 250 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, Iran essentially joined the war by greenlighting its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Since then, this Iranian proxy has launched over 12,000 munitions towards Israeli territory, and not Hezbollah alone. Additional Iranian proxies from Syria, Iraq, Yemen, as well as Iran proper, have launched thousands of rockets towards Israeli territory. Let's now turn to central Israel, where we're joined by Major General in Reserve Gilshon Cohen, formerly a commander of the Israeli Defense Colleges, an Army Corps commander, and many more positions. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask you to initially provide us somewhat of a perspective as to Netanyahu's decision to fire Gallant, who was regarded by many Israelis, as well as people within the international community, as a very potent top defense official.
It is really not at all something that I can follow it with being happy. Exactly the opposite. First of all, because it was badly accepted among the IDF levels, not only the general staff, because they want to see in that chair someone they can trust him regarding the complicated knowledge that required for all that business. Even someone that was an expert of warfare, if he's not really informed, it will take him months. For me, it could take months to study everything. I'm quite involved, but this is the first remark I can share with you.
Indeed. Well, that's an understatement, and I can't agree with you more. But let's turn elsewhere in central Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve Amnon Sofrin, formerly the head of the intelligence division at Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. It's good to see you, General. Would you give us a little bit more insight as to the reasoning behind it? There was a discussion, of course, on the one hand, Prime Minister Netanyahu highlighted disagreements over essential processes that are also relating to the war itself. But on the other hand, we hear defense or outgoing defense minister Gallant noting three reasons from his perspective. The one is the return of the hostages, including all of the 101 hostages, where there was disagreement between him and Netanyahu. I'm not sure where the disagreement is, because both of them want to see all of them returned. So, of course, it has to do with what are they willing to forgo in order to make this happen. The second point that was discussed was matters that are related to the enlistment of all Israeli society at a time when there is a certain deficiency in the number of troops that are being enlisted, of course, with reference to the ultra-Orthodox community. And I'll let you continue from that point.
I think that the disagreement between those two men I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Defense Minister, or outgoing Defense Minister Gallant, are rooted in two aspects. The first one is a different point of view. That means that Mr. Gallant looks only at the defense establishment, its requirements, its needs, and that's it, nothing else. He doesn't really pay attention to what we call the coalition needs, or the need to strengthen the coalition or to keep it together in order to survive politically. And Prime Minister Netanyahu looks, first of all, at his own survival, or meaning, let's say that the survival of this coalition that he gathered together after the last elections held in Israel. And that's his main goal. And that is above all the other issues that are related to what just being mentioned before. Now, the 3 points that you mentioned right now are one of them is, first of all, really the issue of bringing back all the people that are being abducted and held in Gaza. Mr. Gallant wants to go all over the spectrum and to bring them back, and even to pay a higher price than needed in the point of view of Netanyahu. Netanyahu and his colleagues from the right wing part of the government doesn't really want that. They want something else. They want to get more power, more pressure on Hamas, and they think that only by that they will bring them back home. The second issue relates really to the basic point of who is going to serve in the armed forces, meaning it can't be only the secular people that are being recruited and serving as reservists and so on, and other people on the other side are not joining the armed forces because of many reasons. And of course, the last issue is what we call the inquiry committee that Mr. Gallant insisted that it should be something that should be established and begin inquiring what happens on October 7, 2033 and before that. And Mr. Netanyahu, of course, for most reasons that I mentioned before, that he wants to keep in power as long as he can, doesn't want that committee right now.
Indeed. The third point, of course, also relates to the day after, so-called, which General Gallant has highlighted on a number of occasions. There is a gap between the two individuals, and there has been a gap for quite some time. I do think that it's important to highlight that maintaining the stability of a coalition during times of war is a prime concern of any prime minister. The wars are usually not fought this long in Israeli history and this intensity, and therefore everything that is conducted at this point in time is unprecedented from an Israeli perspective. Nevertheless, Gallant, as a defense minister, which under the law in Israel, which was passed in 1976, is pretty much, one can call it the gatekeeper of the defense establishment, and therefore there is an ongoing friction always during times of war between the prime minister and the defense minister, and there's supposed to be a certain equilibrium. But let's now turn to our next guest, Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to hear from you, since today we had dozens of rockets being launched towards Israel, particularly to the north, but also to central Israel, towards areas adjacent to Israel's international airport, namely Ben Gurion.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, the Hezbollah is still attacking Israel with the rockets. We saw it, as you said, this afternoon. The vast majority of them were intercepted by, as we always say, it is not hermetic, and one of two did penetrated the defense. But for this, we have the other component of the defense of Israel, which is the Home Front Command issuing the alerts to the community that they would go to their shelters. And by having this alert, we allowed the people basically to be saved, and this is what we saw. Although there is a very interesting picture today of one of the debris that fell in a car, and it is quite a unique debris because it was the whole part of the missile kept, and only the warhead was not there, and it fell on a car, and we could see the damage of it. So this is the way to save people. When we talk on the defense, we always say that we have three main goals for the defense. One of them is to deny the capabilities of our enemies, and we saw it today. The other one is to save life. We also saw it today. And the third one is really to allow the attack and our cabinet and decision makers to make their decision of the next step, but not under pressure. So this is basically what we saw today from a strategic point of view, but we have to remember that although we could see in the last few weeks the change of the strategic posture of the IDF and Israel at all, we are much more in the initiative that we've been in the first 11 months of this war. I think we saw the effectiveness of this new strategic, I would say, in the last few weeks. And I hope that with the change of the government in the United States and the understanding of our enemies that Israel is in a strategic posture, that it would be much more in the initiative, much more on the offensive if it would be needed. And so I hope it would bring us to this point that settlements and agreements could be made, as I said, again, with the help of the new government in the United States. That could be a turning point, an interesting turning point that is ahead of us, and time will tell.
Indeed. Well, of course, there is until January 20th, where outgoing President Joe Biden is, according to the Constitution, still the chief of some may call him the supreme commander, or whatever it's defined as in the United States. But let's turn now elsewhere.
Maybe one more word, Jonathan. We have to highlight that for between militaries, the U.S. military, the Israeli military, regardless any government, the relations were also always very tight. We saw it in the last year. I'm sure that we would see it also in the future. The relations and the coordination and the military effectiveness, I would say, for sure, on the defense was shown in the last year, and I'm sure also into the future.
Indeed. Well, important remarks. Also joining us, Brigadier General in Reserve, Reddick Shafir, formerly an Israeli Air Force commander, as well as a fighter pilot, among other things, of course. It's good to see you, General. We are at some type of standoff right now between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Israel, of course, with the U.S. elections providing a resounding victory to U.S. President Donald J. Trump, of course, entering as the 47th president on the 20th of January. The Iranians are recalculating their current strategic ploys and are in a much tougher position, to say the least, with the Iranian rial just plummeting to an all-time low of 708,000 rials to the dollar, something that, of course, will only go and become worse as time progresses once the maximum pressure campaign, which just last night somebody who was in charge of that campaign told me that it will be revitalized and enforced in full.
Well, the elections in the United States will bring a major change, but I think firstly and mostly in the Ukraine. Trump had said several times that he will bring an end to that war, and I think he is looking into talking to Vladimir Putin and trying to neutralize that war. which he thinks was instigated by Biden. And by the way, the Europeans were warning the United States against supporting Zelensky in that war. So I think Zelensky should be very worried. I think most of us understand that in that war, the Ukraine will have to give up its eastern Russian-speaking provinces and commit to not joining NATO, but will probably join the European Union. That'll be some kind of an arrangement. That will ease off the pressure on the Russians as far as the Iranians are concerned in needing their support in some of the munitions they miss. And I think that is one part. The other part is that Trump was very close to Saudi Arabia and the Sunni countries, moderate Sunni countries. The price that he was to exact from Israel at the time during his president for the 45th president reign, so to speak, was some kind of a Palestinian less than I would say independent country, but certainly more than Israel was willing to give it. And that may put pressure on Israel's right-wing parties, namely Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who were not actually allowing Netanyahu to speak about the day after in Gaza. And the day after in Gaza solution is the most probable one is the Palestinian Authority. Now, the right-wing extremists are against this because it'll strengthen the Palestinian Authority and all the consequences that come out of that one. So that part of the riddle is something that Trump had talked about before, and that for at least this particular government is a threat. I think for the Israeli people, a lot less so.
Well, I think that the premise of what you say is correct, particularly in the fact that I don't think anybody will be happy with the proposed solution, so to speak, to the highly volatile situation in the Middle East. But the focus of the United States will not be the Palestinian issue. Rather, in contrast to the Harris-Biden administration, the focus will be the Islamic Republic of Iran, and once again, reasserting U.S. dominance in the region in a manner in which does not converge with the current policies exercised by Washington. But I would like to go through the various theaters, focus on 4 theaters, that is. We don't have very much time to do that, so please keep it as short and to the point as possible. General Cohen, we're looking now to Lebanon, and we're seeing that the ground maneuver is coming to a point of culmination. At what point does Israel find itself to potentially start a new type of operation to subdue the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, or are we expected to see some sort of diplomatic attempt to find some sort of resolution instead?
We must understand that in the planning of the campaign in Lebanon, it was very moderate, and it was not that the forces came to the culmination point. From the planning, they have a very well-defined end state, about the 3-5 kilometers of the villages along the border, to take the whole assets and ammunition and preparation like channels, to destroy them, and this was achieved. If Israel will find a necessity to go to another operation, I don't think it will be just to repeat another 2006 operation to the Litani River, because actually it will not deliver the outcome that we really realize that that outcome that we will stop all rockets and drones attacking Israel, to sit on litany will not deliver that. This could be achieved only by an agreement. The main question is whether the agreement will be with a content that we can trust it, at least for time being. Because if immediately Hezbollah will re-equip, then we are just jumping back to square one. Anyhow, I think that it is easy to bring an end to the Lebanese war due to the fact that all agents surrounding that war coming to the table. It is not a table because no one speaking directly with Hezbollah, not with Iran, but everyone of all these partners aware about the necessity to find an end to that war. So we will have to see.
Thank you, General Cohen. General Sofrin, if I may, the Jordanian front, what is the current state of affairs there? Are we still seeing Iranian elements utilizing Muslim Brotherhood syndicates in order to transfer munitions into the sphere of Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley?
There are two ways of action in Jordan. The first one is an attempt to destabilize the regime by joining the Muslim Brotherhood and bringing them weapon systems and trying by that to initiate activities that will destabilize the king's regime and to cause some chaos inside Jordan that will help the Iranians get over it and get control on that part of the land. And the second one is called to use the area of what we call the Jordan Valley on the other side of the wall of the river, meaning the eastern side, to bring weapon systems there and to deliver it over the Jordan River into Judea and Samaria to the groups that are operating there, mainly in the area of Samaria, namely Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and what we call the Popular Front and other organizations as well. And they smuggle a lot of weapon systems to that side, and knowledge coming out from Iran and from Gaza as well regarding what we call rockets to be launched to Israel. And just yesterday or some days before, a rocket prepared to be launched was found very close to Ben Gurion Airport, about 10 kilometers from Ben Gurion Airport, in one of the villages in Samaria. So this area is very boiling, and we should keep it in what we call low profile as much as we can.
Very briefly, on the Iraqi front, I'd like to ask General Shafir. We're seeing an uptick in the launch of unmanned aerial vehicles from that territory by Hashd al-Shaabi towards Israel. What can be done in order to frustrate those activities?
Well, obviously, we could attack the launching area and their depots through the Air Force. It's a lot easier than getting to Iran. That area is generally controlled by the Americans, and maybe some cooperation can take place. Certainly, the data off the drones taking off is something supplied by the Americans. That wouldn't really open another front because we're talking about a small militia type, which, by the way, was bolstered by Yemenites, by Houthis of late. But as with Lebanon, we cannot take out every drone because it's a very simple thing to launch and easy to hide in that area. So other than trying to take out the depots, etc., we will have to withstand the occasional sending of drones. But obviously, the more pressure we put on Lebanon in the coming months, and the more we can thwart the Iranians, the closer we are to an agreement. in Lebanon, and if we put enough pressure and understand how to work well with the French and Americans, this may also cause a change in leverage of power in Lebanon itself, which I think is probably a wish of the Sunnis and the Christians there. So the instability there that was created should be, I think we should apply more pressure in Lebanon because that will solve the whole puzzle. Other than that, the Iranians may lose their most important proxy. So that is a point that we need to look into until January 20th, as was mentioned before.
General Gavish, you have roughly 50 seconds for this. Iran, where ongoing preparations, of course, to defend against the Iranian attack are taking place, but also offensive preparations for that. The United States has, of course, deployed also B-52 bombers, among others. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Iran, there is the strategic level of discussions and the operational one. If we keep on the strategic, just one sentence, this is the main challenge, this is the main stabilizer of the region, and we should all look into it and try to come to a solution with Iran. And I hope this is something that would be done with the new administration, of course. From the operational point of view, Israel is prepared on the defensive and on the offensive. We saw that the offensive was very efficient, and if we would have to defend ourselves, we are here, we are prepared. This is true for the Israeli multi-tier defense, together with the US multi-tier defense, and we are basically ready for all scenarios that could be initiated by the Iranians. We wouldn't suggest it to them, but if they would do it, we would know how to defend ourselves from one hand and then to retaliate from the other.
Indeed. Well, for any action, there's going to be a very significant reaction. But I'd like to immediately thank General Gavish, General Shafir, General Sofrin, and General Cohen for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.